Okay. I think everyone is here. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the panel for A Memory of Light. With me here today, I have, of course, the members of Team Jordan, who hardly need introduction, I think, for most of us at this point, but I'm going to introduce them anyway because it's my job. So first we have Harriet McDougall, Robert Jordan's widow and editor. And jumping out of order here for a minute, we have Maria Simmons, longtime personal assistant to Robert Jordan, as well as queen of continuity for Team Jordan. And if the bumper sticker on her car is to be believed, the person who really killed Asmodean. Of course, I think about half the people here have that same bumper sticker, so we might have to question her sincerity on that one. Then we have Alan Romanchuk, who... Oh, well, you are, I am told that you are a Time Lord of Team Jordan, keeping track of the dates and who was where when.
The clock stopped.
Yeah. And also we have Peter Ahlstrom. Personal assistant to Brandon Sanderson, and according to Maria, the digital guru who helped make sure that Towers Midnight and Memory of Light actually got done on time. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have Brandon Sanderson. Just so you know, in addition to the publication of Memory Light, Brandon has been nominated for 2 Hugos this year. Best Novella for The Emperor's Soul, and Best Related Work, which is Writing Excuses Season 7 with Dan Wells, Mary Robinette Cowell, Howard Taylor, and Jordan Sanderson. Okay, but before we get started with the main panel, I had a request from one of our staff members that I really wanted to fulfill, and so I thought this would be the most appropriate place to do it. So please welcome our amazing mistress of volunteers here at JordanCon, the lovely Christy Lucier.
Oh, I'm not as tall as Lee. Certainly not as tall. I had the great pleasure of not only being a memory keeper for the midnight release in Salt Lake, Provo, when the book came out, but I was asked to do kind of a little quick write-up about it and put it on my Facebook and a blog that I had, and the write-up got such a great response and such overwhelming feedback that I was asked to see if I could read it here today for people who didn't get to hear it or see it. So I'm going to read you what I wrote. It was written 3 days after A Memory of Light came out, and I had not read the book yet, so bear with me. Yesterday, A Memory of Light was released. On Monday, I spent 17 hours in the BYU bookstore getting ready for the midnight release. We unpacked over 120 boxes and sorted through 1,000 books, getting them ready to be signed and purchased that evening. All afternoon, I joked with Spencer Powell of the Fourth Age podcast and Matt Hatch from Theoryland about how I was not going to read the book until right before JordanCon, which they didn't believe, but I really stuck true to it. I spent all afternoon listening to Maria and Brandon and Harriet tell wonderful stories about Robert Jordan, or otherwise we know him as Jim, and talk about the history of the Wheel of Time. The evening was spent with some wonderful memory keepers, including my friend Beast, who helped do security that evening, and we talked a lot about the end and what it meant to all of us. I saw how emotionally affected everybody was. I watched as over 500 people cheered for Team Jordan when they took the stage for the Q&A, and fans yelled loudly at Harriet a very big thanks for her allowing Brandon to finish the series and give us an ending that we had so longed for. One fan stood at a microphone and through tears he said, "These characters have been my best friends for over 23 years, and now it's over." And Harriet, with her beautiful smile, said, "Well, thank you. But because of the fans, they've lived all these years. I worked the signing event till 4 a.m. in the bookstore. I had a great time giving away prizes and memorabilia to all the hundreds of people that waited in line for their chance to thank Brandon. After a long drive home from Salt Lake, after a long hot shower, now laying in bed, my copy of Memory of Light sitting right next to me, signed and personalized by Maria, Brandon, Jason, Matt, and Harriet. It finally hit me. That's the end. It's an ending. 14 years of my life, it's an ending. I have made some of the most amazing friendships. I have a family of people down south who mean the world to me. And JordanCon is the one time of the year that I get a family reunion with some of the most amazing and extraordinary people of my life. Brandon did one amazing thing for Jim and for the series. He finished the pattern for Rand and Perrin and Matt. He wove the last threads that we will know for Egwene, Moraine, Nynaeve, Elaine, Min, Lan. He's laid the final words to rest. Yet Jim did something that he may never know, or according to Harriet, he's probably looking down on us right now and smiling. Jim wove the pattern for you and I, for us. Jim wove the threads that led our Wheel of Time family together today. We are Tabaran. We are the children of the light. We are the Aes Sedai and the Ashaman and the soldiers fighting the last battle. The fans, the friends, the family that we have. This is us. This is what Jim wove. We are the Wheel of Time. We are the Rands and the Perrins and the Egwenes of this age. This is our age. And believe that there is nobody in any age that I would rather stand next to and fight side by side the last battle with than the family that I have in this room today. We are the light in the shadow of darkness, and we will win any battle we face with the Dark One, because Jim wove it so. We are his pattern, we are his threads, and there's been no better creator than he. We are the memory of light. A guest checked in yesterday at registration, and he told one of our directors something very significant. He'd never been to JordanCon before, and he looked around and he said, "Wow, all of this for one writer?" And the funny thing is we kind of looked at him and we laughed and we said, yeah, but it's not for one writer. It's because of one writer. None of us would be sitting in this room if it wasn't for Jim, who is our creator. We are the memory of light. Always remember that.
Yeah. I'd say that pretty much sums it up right there. But we, of course, have more to talk about. And so basically I thought what we would do for this, since, you know, everything, the cat's all out of the bag and more or less. There are a few things, though, that are not totally explicated. So what I thought would be a really good use of our time here would be just to kind of open up the floor for questions. I mean, unless anybody, if you guys have anything to say.
Can I start off with 2 warnings. First off, spoilers. I don't maybe need to say it, but I will anyway. We will spoil everything in this panel. So... the second warning is, as a caveat to that, we reserve the right still to raffle you. The encyclopedia is still coming, so there's still more. And plus, those who know, heard Robert Jordan speak, he talked about this concept, that not everything will be answered, and not everything should be answered, because there needs to be some mystery. And some things we don't have answers to. And he took those with him. Others we've been instructed not to answer. And so you can ask anything, but we may not give you the answer you want.
And I'd like to add, you have the whole Wheel of Time. You have Rand and Matt and Perrin. and Egwene and Moiraine. You have them all. They're with you, and they aren't going anywhere. And you can talk to them, I mean, within reason. But you have them. They're yours forever.
Oh, very good. Go ahead.
I have something much more mundane to say, and that's just that there's plenty of chairs up here in the front. Sit down.
So yeah, if people standing on the sides want to come sit, there are plenty. There are plenty of chairs up here if you want to come sit down.
Front row. If you want to sit next to Jason, I don't know who would want to do that.
Yeah, well, you do have to sit next to Jason, but
There are many seats, like about 8 or 10 more.
yeah, so plenty of seats for anybody who wants to sit. Okay, so what I'm going to do
They're
is
shy woodland creatures in the back. Even though one of them has an Ashander eye,
well,
they're actually
it's all good.
little spotted fawns, is that right?
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start taking questions. I'm going to come down there among you all with my handy dandy remote mic, and so please stand up when I come to you and just raise your hands if you want to ask a question. Okay. Okay, we're good. All right, first one I saw.
I really don't need that much.
Let me feel important, come on.
So what are the things that you were told not to tell us?
You should have saw that one coming.
Well, one of the things is, and this one's more kind of nebulous. It's not a specific thing. There are some specific things, but one of the things is the characters in the world believe certain things, and believe certain things about the way the metaphysics of the world work and things like that. And that's done intentionally through their eyes of misinformation. Some of that's right, some of it's wrong. That's how it is for us and our view of things. We are always learning, we're learning more. And so when you ask the very specific questions about how the world of dreams works or things like this, a lot of our answers are going to be, well, this is what the characters believe. And I know you want the real answer, but the world doesn't know the real answer. Robert Jordan might have, but he intentionally didn't put it in. Does that make sense? But in a more specific sense, the actual epilogue, as it's written, if you go to the book Memory of Light and you read it, the majority of that was written by Robert Jordan before he passed away. There are some tweaks that we did, like I put in the parent sequence there. But if we're talking about the Rand things, he did that. And the scene where Rand rides off at the end with the pipe, Robert Jordan wrote, and he didn't tell us what that means. And he may have talked around with some of Team Jordan about the idea. And Harriet has some theories, I have some theories, but at the end of the day, he wrote it to be ambiguous on purpose. And so if we say, well, this is what it means, that destroys the whole point of him writing an ambiguous ending in the first place. Does that make sense? That's why I'm not going to answer that, to undermine the fact that he left it that way on purpose.
He loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got.
And he was sort of going,
Okay, we got a question right here.
Yeah, sorry.
So near the end of the book, Pavara apparently finds a new way to channel with Andrel by sort of relaxing that control over the self that they're taught to have. I wanted to know, could any channeler achieve that same new ability by loosening that control, or would it require some or all of the unique circumstances that existed between Pavara and Andrel?
It is meant to be something involved in the circumstances of Andrel and Pavara.
Okay, who else do we have?
But I'd like to remind you that there is the beginning of a new age, by definition, on the last page of this book. And if you look back at everything that's happened in a different way, I think you see a number of keys, a number of clues that the next age of the world will be quite different from the age you've been reading about. And you are very free to imagine that for your own selves.
Okay. We got one right here.
This might fall under the category of Brendan was just talking about the things that were left intentionally vague, but in the end, Rand doesn't kill the Dark One, but it's not necessarily clear as to whether or not crushing him into a tiny little ball that he can presumably shove in his pocket is a form of imprisonment, or I mean, is that what that's meant to mean, or is there something else there potentially?
What do you think it meant?
Translation, you'd crush that before I asked.
Tricky we are.
Okay. Who else has questions?
Well, let me give a little bit more on that one, other than the evil cackle. Do remember that all things are cyclical. And so the state that existed during the Age of Legends must be returned to at some point in the ages that follow and come before it. Whether we have actually reached that exact state or not, you may theorize on, but there, I think, is a valid argument that the state has been re-reached. There's a valid argument that it is a different transitional state.
Okay. Right over here.
Hello, this is probably a minute question in the grand scheme of things.
Maria, then. She knows all the good minute question answers.
Was there a scene written that got left on the cutting room floor of how Nynaeve lost her braid? Well, I know it got burned, but...
We felt it was entirely too intimate to be given stage time.
Okay.
It's in the other book. It's in Towers of Midnight. It's mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, if you believe what I said, there's this bridge.
No, it's in there. It's in Towers of Midnight.
Okay.
On screen.
We got a question right here.
My question concerns the Varen letters. Is there a exact list of who actually received them and what they said?
Okay, sorry. Ask again. We were chuckling.
The Varen letters. Is there an actual list of who all received one and what they actually said?
Yes.
Are we allowed to find this list?
Perhaps. You're asking questions that I can answer with one word, so I will.
Can you give us this list?
What's that?
Can you actually tell us the list?
Could I? I could.
You should have been a lawyer.
See how good I've gotten at this? I was so bad at it at DragonCon in 2007 or 8. I've gotten so good at it. I remember going to that first one. Jen was so welcoming. I came up and I saw everyone. I was so excited. I met readers before, and then the questions started hitting me. And I'm like, holy cow! What have I gotten myself into? And then I started listening to interviews with Robert Jordan a lot more because people were asking me questions, and I started hearing how he answered. And I'm like, oh. He was an Aes Sedai. That's where he got it.
Well, then to rephrase for the Aes Sedai and all of us, could you tell us any of the content of Varen's letters which was not already revealed in the text?
Perhaps we will find a time for that in the future. I don't want to reveal it right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Hi. This will not be a one-word answer, I hope. So, way back in the series, we had Herod Fell, who, of course, been an unfortunate end. But I was kind of wondering, what exactly was he on to that caused him to be killed, presumably, and what was he about to find out? And I never felt like that was quite revealed throughout, but maybe I missed something.
Maria, can you handle this one?
I already asked her that one today.
Oh, really? Good. Then she has an answer ready.
We don't know what he was about to find out. Can you hear me? Okay. But
the note he sent Rand was a big enough clue that he was felt to be a danger. So they got rid of him. Theresa was telling me that someone had a theory that he was killed because Samael thought he was Asmodean in disguise.
We know it was Samael because the golem killed him, right? And Samael was the one that had the golem, so we know it was Samael.
Repeat what she said.
Oh.
It was Samael because the golem killed him, and at that time Samael was in control of the golem.
Okay. Okay, so question? Oh,
I'm doing this a little bit from memory, but I remember when I was whipping through Memory of Light, at one point, Daniel from the Two Rivers, I think it was talking with Perry, if I got it right, was talking about some regrets that he hadn't gone with the original original group that left the Two Rivers. Was that a deliberate homage to the person, the mystery person on the cover of The Eye of the World?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that concept, the mystery person. Some of you may have heard Harriet tell this story, but we'll have her tell it anyway to those who haven't heard it. Daniel originally went with them.
And I said, honey, this guy has nothing to do. He said, well, I have plans for him, probably around book 5. I said, well, right now he doesn't say anything and he doesn't do anything, and if you bore your readers, there'll never be a book 5. And he said, no. And he took the manuscript, we were actually working on paper in those days, think of that, and came back a couple of days later and he said, Harriet, I'm embarrassed how easily Daniel unzipped. And I said, I'm sorry, honey.
So I've always been fascinated by that idea and being able to talk to Harriet about these stories and about Daniel originally being in there and all of this stuff gave me a particular affection for Daniel that I hadn't had before as a fan. I'd read it and enjoyed the books and I knew him, but working on this, there's something there, like I guess it's just an affection. And so I wanted to make use of Daniel where I could, and that was put in there because we know that the Wheel of Time world follows the concept of a multiverse. There are shadows of worlds, and there are mirrors of worlds, and there are possibilities. Not all of them became real, but there is a world out there, a fairly real one, where Daniel went with them. That book was half written, and so that's a really real shadow of the actual world. And so there will be hints of that, and part of Daniel knows that in some other places and some other times he was with them.
He knows he was a bore.
Does that make sense?
Sorry, baby.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what that is a nod to. Both in-world, like a lot of things I do like this. I've said before, being a fan myself, I like to be careful not to put too many things in that are merely fan nods. Yet at the same time, having been a fan and been a part of this for so long, these things are part of how I view the world of the Wheel of Time. And so something like Daniel, where I'm like, he'd have a sense of this, wouldn't he? That, that somewhere in the great cosmology, somewhere in the pattern, he could have been spun in. Anyway, that's my read on it, and that's why I put in things like that, and that's where that comment came from.
All right.
We have a veiled Aiel among us.
I'm scared.
Yeah. Well, we got costume contests coming up, so yeah. All right, did you have a question?
Okay, sometimes I have asked long questions and gotten short answers, so I'm going to reverse that. Nakomi.
Nakomi comes from specific things written in Jim's notes, and I'm not even sure if Team Jordan knows which ones were the inspirations for this, that I felt a nod needed to be made toward, and that is where Nakomi came from, and that's all I will say, that Nakomi was suggested by the notes, and I felt it appropriate.
I saw someone over here, who, I think it was you first, yeah.
Just halfway back to a question before you just answered, are there any other little tidbits that you haven't revealed before that are fun, like the Daniel story?
Oh boy, there's got to be. What can I tell you? I was talking earlier during my Q&A about the deleted sequences, and I think it's probably okay for me to talk about what we cut and why we cut it. Are you guys okay with that? And there are two major things that we cut, and one of them was I wrote a scene that I enjoyed very much, which was a bridal wreath scene, during which the three women were weaving a bridal wreath for Rand, right before Aviendha goes to him in the first quarter of the book or whatnot. And it was an extremely fun scene because they were each like finding things that represented them. So there were lots of thorns and various different types, and they would talk about them and things like this. Well, the way I write books these days is, particularly Wheel of Time books and something like the Stormlight Archive, is I'll narrow in on a few characters and I'll write their sequence through for a while. That lets me keep that character in mind and have their motion as a character stay consistent, give them an arc and who they are. And so I'll write these things separately. When we put it together, where this scene came to lie was opposite too much dread and things happening in Camelin. For this scene, which was much more lighthearted, to match. You couldn't go from Talmanes and his story to this scene, and it just didn't work emotionally. Beyond that, the ending that Jim wrote, Rand wonders which of the women will follow him. Right? He still has that wonder. And Maria wrote and said, I really feel that having him get engaged undermines that sentence in the epilogue, and we want to be extra careful. We have so little of actual writing that Jim did. We have a lot of notes, but so little actual writing that it's very important that we work extra hard not to do anything that would undermine that, particularly that ending that he wrote. And so we cut that scene out. And it did not happen. It's not even, some scenes we cut will be like, well, this actually happened. It's canon. We just didn't have space for it for pacing reasons. But this one couldn't happen because we felt it undermined that scene. And then the other one was a large sequence where Perrin goes into the Ways to shut the Waygate into Camelin from behind, if at all possible. And it's an extended sequence, and there were a number of issues with this one. This happens in every book where you end up cutting things. First off, it was, Harriet pointed out, we really didn't need it. Narratively, after everything was done, the battle just moved away from Camelin anyway, and they still had an army to fight. So closing that Waygate didn't accomplish anything narrative. That's a structural narrative sort of thing. It's like, why are you spending all this time? Also in structural narrative, I came off of Towers of Midnight right into A Memory of Light, and the character I'd been writing in Towers of Midnight was Perrin, who was a focused character of Towers of Midnight. And I launched into A Memory of Light and just did a lot of his scenes first. Well, I was very much in a Perrin mindset, and because of that, it very much front-weighted the book toward Perrin, to the point that, alpha readers are reading it and being like, is anyone else in this book but Perrin? Is there any, and there was a lot of Perrin going on. And we felt like, character viewpoint-wise, we needed to rebalance everything. And then the final reasoning was, all of the reasons I came up with, which I still think some of them would work, to close away gates within the Ways, were vetoed by the continuity queen as viable options. Because, waygates are tough to destroy. And Perrin's modestly small strike force, she found it did not work continuity-wise with the things that I had come up with. And I kept coming up with more, but by then the other two big reasons made it so that this sequence, fighting for it didn't make sense when narratively we didn't need it, and also we needed to find ways to cut back on parent sequences to rebalance the book. And so at the end of the day, we cut all of those things out. And it was the right move to do. Now, there are a couple things we lost out of there that I really miss. Two main ones. One is the Ogier showed up in the Ways. which was a much more dramatic entrance for them as opposed to how they ended up showing, which is fine. But you know, I had intentionally not put them in Towers of Midnight to make you wonder where they are, and then having them show up at the last minute to help Perrin was a great narrative sequence. And the other thing is we had the Bornhall conversation with Perrin happen in a much more fluid and natural way with Perrin finding out about his parents and things like that.
Yeah.
And those two things worked a little bit better the other way, but the book as a whole works far better with cutting these sequences. So there's something that I can tell you that ended up getting cut. Plus the the Bayo scenes, which are in the anthology, the charity anthology. So.
That's the Unfettered?
Unfettered, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And those ones are actually still canon, as in everything in there happened, but we didn't go over it for continuity error. So when you read that one, just be aware that some of the little small details may not happen, like the way words are used or how the Sharans speak and things like that. Though the actual events of what happened are what happened.
Okay, very good. I think you.
Can you talk about Androl and whatever relationship existed between him and Jane Farstrider that was briefly obliquely mentioned in the book?
My vision of Androl was the ultimate jack of all trades. The man who was searching for who he was, but couldn't find it because who he was not allowed, right? He couldn't become an Ashaman, even though a piece of him knew that's what he needed to be, because male channelers, this wasn't a thing. And so he went from place to place, from job to job, learning a little of everything. Meanwhile, we have Jane Farstrider basically traveling everywhere and knowing everybody. So this more says something more about Jane than it does about Androl, and that is just they did cross paths, and Androl did have a stint where he tried doing going some places that people don't normally go, because he thought maybe the wanderlust was what he was feeling, and he fell in with Jane for a little while.
Let's see.
So in the deleted scene you mentioned about Perrin, what are some of the ideas you had for how he would close the way gate that got shot down?
Well, my first one was, hey, can we just get a bunch of channelers in there and blow it up? It's, more power, right? Boom. And Maria's like, no, just not possible. Look at this thing where Jim said this, and look at this thing in the books, just not possible. I'm like, that's okay. We'll just destroy the island underneath it, right? It's no use to the shadow if it's tumbling eternally through the darkness. And that one was discussed, and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, all right, fine, we'll just destroy the bridges because we know the bridges can go down. And then if Perrin takes out the bridge, what are the trolleys going to do? And that was where we were, and that was a viable option, except for the fact by then they had argued the point that we don't need this sequence. And so I think if that had been the only problem, then it would have been okay. We could say, okay, we destroy the bridge, we stop the trolleys. But the other two problems by then had become a large enough issue that even fixing that was not enough to justify the sequence.
Tied off gateway?
Yeah, but you could, I mean, the thing about tied off gateways is tied off gateways are not eternal. Otherwise, they'd be hanging around all over the place, even still.
Okay, got one right here.
Will you please elaborate on Machin Shin and all of its stuff and the ways and how that came about?
Maria?
It was a byproduct of the taint. Excuse me. It was made by men using sardine, which was tainted, and it was. Jim used the word bacteria in a description once, and it just kind of grew and kept going, and at some point, the wind.
This quote is on the Waygate site. On the answer you gave us is on waygatefoundation.org.
Okay.
If you didn't hear that, there's an answer that Maria has given to this question on waygate.org that you can also look up.
WaygateFoundation.org.
Waygatefoundation.org.
Okay. We got one right here.
Yeah, quick question. I kind of felt like one of the things that was maybe missing out of A Memory of Light was a reunion between Moraine and Swan. Did this happen off screen? And what would that reunion have been like?
Yes, that one did happen. I answered a question similar to this earlier in my reading. I did make a big list of all the reunions that could happen in the books I was working on. And I chose to do some and I chose not to do others. Part of that is because, I don't want to show you everything. These people have lives and we can't show it all. Part of that was decided that if these books are just full of reunions, then it's going to undermine the severity and the darkness of the situation. And part of it is just the logistics sometimes didn't work out. And so that one I did imagine happening off screen, whereas the Perrin Matt Rand one did not happen off screen. They just did not ever have a chance logistically to get back together, at least not before the end of everything. But that one I do imagine happened off screen.
Okay.
Quick, was there ever any sequence or version of the book that had the hordes and hordes of novices and accepted doing something other than being battery powder for the yellows?
No.
Fair enough. Okay, we got a question back here.
So when the Forsaken came into this age, they found artifacts from the Age of Legends that hadn't been previously known, like the golem. Are there more stasis boxes from the Age of Legends that haven't been discovered? I hope you got the
Did you understand that?
Yes, I understood it. There are more stasis boxes that have not been discovered. I would find it incredibly unlikely that everything has been found. Would you agree with that?
Okay. Right here.
So we know that the dragon is always reborn in every age, but one thing that I always thought was interesting is so much of what's happening in the third age seems to be based on what happened in the Age of Legends. The Forsaken are from the Age of Legends. Rand identifies himself as Luce Theron. But in the Age of Legends, did the dragon have, nemesis from the first age? And why is so much of what's happening in the third age a reflection of the second age, when really, if it was cyclical, you think you'd have this, each age is sort of independent and open. So I'm just wondering why so much of what happens in the third age was viewed as an image of the second.
Give Robert Jordan a break.
Well, and besides, the dragon is not reborn every age. Every age is not a reflection of the one that came before. There's 7 spokes to the wheel, and before things start over again, you go through those cycles. So it just so happened in this case that the dragon was in the age prior to the age of the dragon reborn. Next age may be, an age of paradise, or near paradise, before things break down again.
Okay. Let's see. You already had a turn. I'll go back. All right.
Without being vague, what does a memory of light actually mean?
I forget.
Well, think of the eclipse and the gathering darkness of the world throughout the whole last 3 books. At the point of the eclipse, there is no light except in memory. That's how I understand it. It's Jim's title.
Okay.
And there's a hand there that belongs to a lady. It doesn't have a sleeve. Yeah, there. She's been waving. Or
Okay.
summoning or commanding or whatever it is.
This is a question for the whole panel. Who lived that you wish could have died, and who died that you wish could have lived?
Yes.
I wish they all could have lived.
Yes.
That's not right. It's not, when I'm constructing a story, part of the process for me is allowing characters to take risks, and those risks to have legitimate and real consequences. And some of those risks are foolish for the consequences incurred. And some of those risks are wise, and some of them are brave, and some of them are not. But I allow the characters to do that. Now, in this specific case, we did have the notes from Robert Jordan, in which he indicated several of the people who were to not make it himself. What's that? He was very explicit about Bashir and his wife. Because that was one of the ones where he's like, and this puts Fael and Perrin into this situation by the end. So that's just an example. He was also very explicit about Gowan. He had these things about what to do. With that, we used that to build the outline, and we allowed the characters to take risks. And some of the people he hadn't indicated either way, we decided should make it, and some we decided shouldn't. And yes, I wish they all could have made it. They're my friends. But that's not a story. So that's my take on it.
It's not a huge, world-encompassing battle. People die.
Very true. All right. Did you guys have anybody you wished had made it, or wished had died?
I wish Roland had made it, but that was bad.
Right.
Yeah. I was so shocked. And Jim said, "What?
That was
toast."
That was gutsy on Jim's part. I think that whole sequence was very bold.
I'm trying to think.
What about
Somebody I wish would have died. But I can't think.
Now, Cat Swain got exactly what she deserved. Where's April? Where's April? She would agree with this, right?
I think she's kind of our show back.
Oh,
yeah. She's otherwise occupied. Alan, did you have the answer for that one, or do you?
I think it was just right.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
I do think Bella should have lived.
We all mourn Dena.
Here, here.
Okay. So something Alan touched on. How mutable are the 7 ages? I mean, because Alan touched on the dragon being reborn. Dragon is always reborn in the 3rd age, or is it just something that has to happen? Or, I mean, is there always a Rand? Is there always an Egwene? Is there always channeler? I understand there's always channelers, but how mutable is it?
Well, we're living in an age right now. Are there any dragons around? It's the wheel continues to turn. The creator set the pattern. It has a self-correcting mechanism. That self-correcting mechanism, when the influence of the Dark One gets too large, is the dragon, or the equivalent. And it's spit out into the pattern as needed, and it self-corrects and goes on. It doesn't happen every single, notch of the wheel necessarily. There can be an infinite number of things that happen, but it always boils down to in harmony, balance, imbalance, which keeps going back and forth. That's what life is. Sin, goodness, forgiveness of sin. That's the way it is.
All right, very good. You said you had one?
I was wondering if we could talk about, in the first JordanCon, somebody asked about the resource materials you all used for inspiration for the battles or different things like that. And you said that you couldn't talk about it at the time because that would give too much away. And so I didn't know if maybe you could tell us now.
Great, Captain. Do you want to handle this?
I don't think there's time right now. Maybe another conference.
I mean, there were specific battles that we used as a guide. I don't know if you want to say these. I'll leave it up to Alan if you want to give them a clue of where we got some of our inspiration or not.
No, just from a total sense of evil, I would like to see who comes up with the answers to that, rather than feeding it to you. So those of you who are really interested in military history should actually be able to pick out where these things came from in real life.
Okay, go. Let's go right here.
Motto.
Okay, I have
Y'all
a
can
question.
play with that one.
Question about Demandred. Through the whole series, there's this whole big mystery. Where is Demandred? What is he doing? What brilliant scheme was he's whipping up? You know, he was hiding where no one knew where he was. And then, of course, he shows up with the Sharan army and spends the entire last battle on a mountain ranting. Lose Theron, come
He
fight
killed a
me.
lot of people too.
Yeah, he did.
Yes, he certainly
but,
did.
You know, his whole thing was, Lose Theron is mine. You know, did he not read the prophecy about the Sheol? You know, what was that all about?
He seriously believed that if he put enough of Luz Theron's friends and loved ones in danger, that he could draw Luz Theron down to fight him. He was forbidden from going up because his job was down where he was. So he could not go where he knew where Luz Theron was going, but he sincerely believed that he could have brought him down. And he might have been right if Rand had not gone through certain experiences during this life, which gave him the fortitude he needed to resist that. I mean, there was a serious temptation for him that he could have interfered in that battle and gone there. And that would have been, you know, that would not have ended well. In fact, I actually had a sequence written for him doing that I toyed with. And Harriet stamped it out, rightly so. But it was one of those what ifs. Yeah. If Rand had gone, he would not have won.
Okay.
And weren't Demandred's hench persons fabulous? And I love that.
Yeah.
Brandon did such a job.
Okay, you had one.
So earlier you gave a list that had a notable absence on it. You mentioned Gowan, but there was no mention of the target of much dark attention, which was Egwene. Egwene, which one of you got the kill shot on her?
I specifically left that out because I have not answered it, and so I haven't said either way.
This looks like a good place to answer.
Yes, it is a great place for you to wonder. It is. I've specifically left a lot of that focus on lesser characters, and I don't know that I want, I don't want to answer that one. It doesn't feel right to
Some
me.
things are wrapped in the mysteries.
Yes.
The fog and mist of the author, editor, team relationships.
I will ask you this. Those who went into this book, did you seriously believe that all of the Two Rivers folk were going to make it? I see the majority of you saying no. You can, by process of elimination, figure out who had a chance of this, because you knew who the Outriggers included, which eliminated somebody. But you could have figured out some things. But I'm just going to say, if you seriously believe that the last battle could come, and there not be this sort of heroic sacrifice, then, I'm glad that you live in such an optimistic world.
Okay, we're running a little low on time, so I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we're going to start wrapping up. Let's see. There's people back here have been up, I think, waiting the longest.
Thanks. Since the last
last book happened, and I know everybody here has kind of got a real image of the first time they saw The Eye of the World, the first time we had an experience with that. Harriet, my question was for you. What was your first experience with The Eye of the World? Did Jim already have that? Did Jim already have that before you guys met, or?
Did Jim already have what?
I think. Wheel of Time. Did he already have that started? What was your first experience with the Wheel of Time?
Well, my first experience with the Wheel of Time was when he gave me The Eye of the World to edit, and he gave it to me in pieces. I mean, that's how we did things.
Had he told you about the story before at all?
No. No, he didn't. He told Tom Doherty enough to get a contract. I was editorial director of Tor Books and also his wife. I could edit him, but the one thing I could not do was negotiate his contracts with him, obviously with a total conflict of interest. I could not represent both Tor and Robert Jordan, so I was pacing outside while Jim was locked up in Tom's office. And he told Tom enough, so Tom gave him a 6-book contract. Tom knew his writing and liked it, and figured, well, if it doesn't work for 6 books, we'll figure out something else to do, and meanwhile I will have locked the shackles on his ankles. So anyway, he worked on The Eye of the World for 4 years. I don't know how much of it he had done, some, before he signed the contract, because it was a while. I don't remember exactly how long before he gave me the first part, and it was just super. And when I'd read about the first third, having handily murdered Dana, I called Tom and said, Tom, you've got to read this one. He said, yeah, why? Because the pressure on a publisher to read is immense. And I said, because either after 6 years of marriage, I have fallen into the wife trap, or this is absolutely wonderful. So Tom read it and did a superb job of publishing once he got his hands on the whole thing. And I remember at one point we were talking about something as the editing was going on, and I said, now when they get to Tarvalon, and he said, they don't get there in this book, Harriet. And he looked at me with his great big blue eyes. And, okay. And we did. I did make him really angry about one thing, which I will tell you, asking for tidbits, and this is a serious, teeny tiny tidbit. He had these cats, and they would saunter through common rooms, and, you know, cats turned up all the way through the book. And I said, you don't put any colors on them. He said, they don't need colors. I said, uh-huh. And I picked up my pencil, and I knew he was going to be reading it after me. And one was red, one was purple, one was green. He said, there are no such cats. I said, this is a fantasy, isn't it? So he was really mad, and he went off and he put real colors on the cats.
Okay, so we are almost out of time, so I'm going to, as promised.
Brandon Sanderson. You have toe.
What'd I do this time?
All right.
Aren't you supposed to not have to tell someone they have
Yeah, I know. I'll get to that.
Uh-huh.
All right. At JordanCon 1, I asked you if Bella would survive the last battle. In the hopes that you would answer, because I knew no other character would you answer this for, and there was a precedent set by the TV show Lost.
Mm-hmm.
They said that the dog Vincent would survive the entire series, well before the series was over. So I asked this, and you answered yes. We of course know what has happened to Bella.
I tried to explain this to Harriet, that I had promised this to fans.
And I said, tough.
Yeah.
So, you have Toad not because Bella died, but because you said otherwise before that.
In the book I wrote, she survived.
After a fashion. I took mercy on her and I wrote that one sentence, which ends "and died." But I will say that I am making amends in a way. I have given money to the Medical University of South Carolina for a rooftop garden. I don't know how many of you have done hospital time, probably most of you with friends and relations or yourselves, and you look out of the window at a bunch of horrible roofs that have equipment on them. It's extremely depressing. And there's a good deal of research that shows that patients who look out at a garden view spend fewer days in the hospital and require less in the way of painkillers. So I've given them the money for a rooftop garden that is seen by 75 rooms. And its name, I couldn't think. They said, "What do you go to college?" The Harriet McDougall gift. And I said, "No, I want it to be called Bela's Garden." And in memory of James Oliver Wrigley Jr., and that's what it will be. So Bela has a garden, will have a priority.
Harriet has met her Toad. So, Toad's a very personal thing, and each person has to do it in their own way. So I can only suggest one thing to you, and that is if you put Bella into the Stormlight Archives. Because I know that you've said before that you didn't want any, or you didn't think it would be right to put any other characters in there, but being that it's a non-speaking character, I thought you might make one allowance, and you would continue. You would be true in what you said. Bella would live on.
And can she have her nice black cape from the Dark Friends Social? Didn't think I'd turn on you, did you?
I knew this one was going to come up. This will haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm not sure if this is Toe I can meet. I'll do my best.
I'm sorry, Brandon.
It is my fault because, as Harriet points out, she says, well, if you wanted her to live, you would not have written her into a situation in which a horse should not be able to survive. And it was, the line that Harriet added was because I had put her in such a dire situation. And I was just planning to be like, yeah, she pulls through. Perrin will see her at the end, chewing on some grass next to a bunch of trolley bodies or something like that. And Harriet said, no, this is not realistic. And you're being realistic with the human characters and forcing them, to go through this. You have to be willing to do the same thing. And I couldn't write the line though, so she wrote it.
Okay, well,
good line.
It's a very good line.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are out of time for questions. But before we wrap up, I understand that I need to call Mr. Matt Hatch up here. Yes, so come on up.
So there's a tradition for the last 5 JordanCons of presenting Harriet with a gift at the end, and Jen asked Theoryland if we would do that this year. And so along with that, since this is the end of the books, I also wanted to present Brandon with something. We've had Theoryland's always had kind of an interesting relationship with Brandon. I think his quote was, Theorylanders, I love you even though I feel like I'm surrounded by a pack of wolves. I think that's and so that tends to bite us every once in a while, but he did a great service to Theoryland by putting us into Towers of Midnight, and if you haven't read the chapter, it's an appropriate description. It takes 2 seconds to read, and I think you should hear it. He said the inn had walls dark from years of men smoking pipes inside it, which is funny. And the windows, though of fine glass, had grown opaque with dirt and smoke. It was a tradition that they never be cleaned. The weathered sign out front had a wagon wheel painted on it, and the official name was the Dusty Wheel. Everyone called it the Rumor Wheel instead. It was the best place in Camelin to listen to rumors. Most of them were untrue, but that was half the fun. So according to that description, I thought about it a long time, and we came up with kind of a chapter icon logo, which is the shirt I'm wearing, which we took one of Jim's pipes, which seemed appropriate to put on the shirt. We actually put a glass window in the front, in the middle, which to symbolize the inn, and on the right side we had the wagon wheel, which went along with this description. So we put a professional print together, and I just wanted to present that to you. For Harriet, I was watching an interview you gave, and you talked about the value you had in reading something on paper. So this is Theoryland's gift to you. If you want to open it, I can describe what it is as you open it. So one of the things we like to do around Theoryland is always we're big on what's factual, you know, and so we got really upset by all the fans for so many years that would not record things. They wouldn't record what he said. They would come back and say, well, I know he said this to my answer, and we'd say, well, that's not a legit answer to anything, you know, you need to record it. And so a lot of fans did record verbatim things, or wrote down verbatim things that he wrote, and thanks to all the fans, this is a gift I consider. There's no names in here, it says, read and find out between Robert Jordan and the fans. And it's a book of verbatim quotes, thanks to all the archiving you did as fans, and also archiving that Theresa did with all those in Theoryland to put these verbatim things together. So I took all the verbatim quotes I could find, and it's just, I thought you would enjoy that, Harriet. I doubt you've probably read all of the different things that the papers have said, but I don't know that you've ever read every single thing the fans have said.
This is wonderful. Here's one at random. What is Patton Fane's overall role in the Wheel of Time, besides hating Rand with a passion? Robert Jordan, read and find out. Except, you should be able to figure out most of it by now. Think a little bit. It's all there, really. Question. You're an amazing author. If only everyone else in the world was like you, then the world might be a better place. Robert Jordan. How true, how true.
So we thought you'd enjoy this, because I'm sure you weren't at every signing, and so thank you to every single fan out there. It's a fun little book. It's kind of unique. I would say it's one of its kind, but I did print one for myself. So
Thank you very much, Matt. This is marvelous. Oh, yes, there was. He did say at one point, I am a very modest man. There have been monuments raised to my humility.
So thank you very much for everything you've done.
Can you tell us something of how you go about keeping track of such a complex world and so many characters? Not without unzipping my head with a can opener.
We're all going to listen. Go on.
How did you develop the female characters in your series? They are a strength to the series and are interesting because they seem to contain genuinely, quote, feminine thought patterns. I spent 40-odd years listening to women, and besides that, they're all based on my wife.
So, can we get a round of applause to Harriet and thank her for everything.
Thank you guys so much for being here and for doing this and for everything. I mean, we've said it so many ways, but it always bears repeating. So, you know, you guys rock. And so
do you, every last one of you.
That's right, we all rock. And so that concludes the Memory of Light panel.